Hello YouTube, it's me, Techno, and today I'm going to be discussing something super different. Today I'm going to be discussing how to write a good weapon for a character. Nobody asked me to do this, it's just something that I've been really thinking about for a long time. So, let's get started with swords because they're pretty much the most basic weapon that anybody could ever have. So, if you have a sword, typically the amount of edges and the way that the sword is described or the way that it's portrayed is typically the way that you're going to go into your personality. And this goes into writing a character. Like, let's say your character has a double edged sword. That means it's got like two sides, both sides are serrated, and it comes up to a point at the top, or maybe it's just flat. And typically that will describe a person as being like not steadfast, but really open, the very opposite of steadfast. They're very open to new things, and when they come to talk about philosophy, they have a point, they have their own standing, and they're ready to discuss it. If you have a single edge weapon serrated only on one side, then what that means is that you're very steadfast, like samurais typically are, single edged, live by the code, die by the code, that sort of thing. And that's what a single edge typically means. If you have a very point at the top of your double-edged weapon, then that means that you are going towards a particular goal. That you're not just going around fighting for the sake of fighting, that you have something that you're going to do. If you have just a flat top, then chances are, sorry to break it to you, you're just a side character. And if your single-edged serrated weapon is curved, then your sword will typically describe you as somebody who is very bland. If you have a straight weapon, a straight single edge, that means you're not moving where you're from. You're very strong, steadfast, very stubborn, and you're not going to move on your positioning ever. If somebody's trying to convince you that what you're doing is wrong, then they might as well just give up because they're not going to get anywhere. If you're curved, you're a bit less interesting to me because sure you have your own point, sure you have your own like devices and stuff, but you're not very held strong to those beliefs. Sure, you feel very passionate about them, but you don't really feel very deep. The point on a single edged weapon doesn't really portray too much because I've never really seen too many different single edged points. I just see one, and it just goes into a top, and or like maybe the top part is very grinded off or something. But you're not very unique if your point on your single edged weapon is different. If your single edged weapon is single handed, then that means you're not really about that fighting lifestyle. You sure you have strong beliefs, but you're not willing to jump into a fight right away. If your single edged weapon is two handed, then you're always prepared for a fight and that you're always ready to fight for what you believe in. Same can also be said about a double edged weapon too. If you have a single handed double edged weapon, then sure you like fighting, but you're not going to go and you're going to fight for everything. If you can talk your way out of it, you most likely will. The double edged weapons are very more akin to people who are very political or have strong political standing. Single edged weapons are more for people who are just trying to get through the day. A majority of the time, whenever you see action characters, they're going to have a double edged weapon because that's just a very signature thing. But if you're gonna see like a protagonist, a majority of the time they're also gonna have like single-edged weapons. Like let's look at Cloud from the Final Fantasy series. He has a supersized single-edged weapon. Now, the size of the weapon will also determine what kind of character you're talking about. If you have a very small weapon, then the character is very secluded and not very open to other things. If they're supersized and they're super ready, they're super strong, they're super passionate about what they feel. Now, I've noticed characters like Inuyasha from the Inuyasha series that have super weapons and they're still very reserved. But that's because they have other importance in their life. Like, it is a single edged weapon, and he's not very steadfast in the series. Uh, I'm just saying that these things that you have for your weapon are a good way to describe what kind of character that you're trying to build, and it's easier for that way too. Like if you're trying to build a very symbolistic weapon, then yeah, you could typically go very deep into this. It's sort of like the zodiac of weapons sort of situation. I have a character, he's a half dragon, and he has both a single edged and a double edged weapon. The single edged weapon represents the way that he gets through sort of small situations. There are things that he uses to fight opponents and get them out of the way. The double edged weapon is used for fighting opponents that are really tough and really strong. His double edged weapon is really big. It's for if you want to get into symbolism, the only reason he would bring out the double edged sword is if he has to fight something like depression, anxiety, or maybe going through the stages of grief, something very difficult for him to get through. And the single edged weapon would typically be used for, like, let's say he's got a test coming up, or maybe he needs to get his driver's license renewed. He would just study. He would get through all of these things. He'd do those psychology things he learned on the internet, and then he would just get it done and over with, you know. So the single edged thing, small things. The double edged, big things, big philosophy. This has been Techno. If you want to hear more about weapon designs for characters, please subscribe and like this video. Thank you very much. Adios.